Anyway, I hope you're okay, folks, and your week's gone all right. Just for those of you new to this and maybe watching it on Facebook, on YouTube rather later, that we are currently live in the Troubled Kids group in Facebook. So if you go into that group, the Troubled Kids group, and you request to join, that's a private group that I set up just to really be a safe place for like-minded people who are interested in helping troubled kids and their families to recover, just so that we could be in a place that was sort of for us, really. I know there are one or two older young people in there, and there are parents in there as well, but it's mainly professionals involved in helping troubled children and their families. But really, it's a place where we share resources and training, ideas, infographics, websites, anything really that we think can be useful in serving the folk that we're all trying to help. So if you're new to this, welcome. If you don't do Facebook and you want to catch these, you can get them later on YouTube. Just make sure you subscribe so that we can make sure you get those videos as and when we post them. So we tend to go live once a week on a Wednesday at noon, and then the videos go up later then on Facebook. So my name is Johnny Matthew. I'm a social worker and a criminologist, and I'm here to help, really. Not because I've got all the answers. I am more a shepherd of good stuff from everywhere else. So there's tons of expertise in the Troubled Kids group itself, and just the last couple of days, the things that have come up and the responses to those and the resources that have been shared have been fantastic. So that's good. So we're here today to do a bit of an Ask Me Anything session. So if you've got a question, stick it in the comments. And while you're doing that, let's play the theme tune just because it makes me smile. There we go. It always makes me smile. I don't know. And on a sunny Friday, makes me smile even more. So there we go. Welcome everyone. Who's in? Zoe is in. Hi Zoe. There's a few others in. Just let me know you're here. Just hop on the comments, say hello, and then I can refer to you as we go through. If you've got any questions, pop them in there. Lovely. Okay. I've got, so while you guys are thinking about the questions that you want to put in the comments, thank you for that, Claire. I think Zoe rather, I think you've only half finished that. Oh, there we are. Brilliant. Pop your questions in there, and I'll get to those as we go through. But there was a question in the group that this week in the Troubled Kids group, so I want to address that just because I think it hasn't come up before, but I'm almost surprised it hasn't, because it's come up certainly plenty of times in my practice, and therefore probably yours as well. And if it hasn't, then it probably will at some point. So I think it's worth looking at. So the question is from Clary. As I say, it's in the Troubled Kids group, and she says, hi. She said, would you be able to share any advice regarding an adolescent hoarding food? He's done it in the past, but it's getting worse. Trying to advise a parent who's actually a friend and is her biological child. Now, it turned out in the chat in the group that actually wasn't her biological child. He's a looked after child. Obviously, considering if he's doing this because he might physically need the food, but from what I've been told, it sounds like more of an emotional response. So, I think just to say, as I said before, it's a common. This is the thing that happens. Food-related issues crop up. It might be a kind of starvation thing. It might be a hoarding thing, and all the rest of it. It can come up in relation to physical problems, organic-related issues. I think of a lad I dealt with some years ago with Prader-Willi syndrome, quite profound learning disabilities, but a massive food thing. going on for him as well, and obesity and problems with that, very rigid routine and all the rest of it. There's some really good responses to this question in the group, guys, by the way. So just to say that, just to draw your attention there, really, this obviously can be linked to neglect. If kids have struggled with either a lack of routine, a lack of consistent provision of food, or both, then clearly that can be an issue. If kids live in a home where food isn't consistently provided, or there's a lot of competition for food, or it's provided, but it's provided in the context of not knowing quite when the next meal is going to come, or where it's going to come from. It's going to be a big meal or a snack. If parents have quite troubled lives themselves, particularly where there's major mental health and or substance misuse, comorbidity problems around that, dual diagnosis things, then that also quite often can have a trickle down knock-on impact in terms of food. So it could be about that basic underlying thing of, will there be enough food? So while there is food, I'll take some. And it may not be a cognitive process. It might be a very physically, psychologically kind of urge process, but then nevertheless it happens and can be a real problem for kids and for those people who are looking after these children. It can be a soothing thing. Some kids will take food not so much as nourishment, but as a self-soothing, a comforting thing. Not comfort eating like I would do with wine and chocolate, but I guess it's on a similar spectrum, just down at the other end of it, where it may be a subconscious or a conscious thing that children feel better when they eat. People feel better when they eat. Some people default to that, and children will do that too. So it can be a soothing thing. There's obviously an overlap then between that and anxiety. Again, it's about regulation and trying to bring back to calm. But it may be specific food anxiety as well. In my experience, it's less about body image and identity. Hoarding is less about that. But as I say, I haven't got massive experience of that. But that's less the case. It could be in relation to that and some kind of body image identity thing. But generally speaking, certainly in my experience, that's not been the case. It's been more linked to the neglect and inconsistency around food, or the calming, self-soothing regulation kind of thing seems to happen a bit more. It can be a power and control thing, of course, that if children lack that sense of agency and the ability to kind of control what's going on around them, they may have what psychologists call an externalized locus of control. So they feel the power lies everywhere else and not with them. They're like a twig on a stream. They're just kind of in life and going with the flow of what everybody else decides. And that obviously can be very disempowering, and children may discover that actually if they take some food and hoard it, they can have time and do something that's very volitional. They decide when it happens, they make it happen, and they can press on with that. So I think the other thing at the moment that's worth talking about briefly is that the lockdown situation and the kind of for some children it's been brilliant, and we talked about that in one of the previous live streams. But for some, it's been really anxiety provoking, and it may be that they're more anxious than they were before, and it may be less about food for food's sake and more about a way of dealing with anxiety, and that could be related to the current situation, and struggling with that. Lots and lots of fears around that. Fears of how long is this going to last? Will this ever change? Will I die? Will somebody else die if they catch the virus? What about all the people that have died? Will life ever be the same again? What about going back to school? My friends, will I be bullied rather on social media? What about, bullied in school? What about this maybe bullied on social media as well? I've had contact with my friends and the big wide world through my phone, but actually when I go back, what will that be like? So that's really difficult. for some kids, and obviously that whole thing can make it worse. I think it's back again to this idea we talked about before. With any kind of behaviour and presenting problem, really, it's to think about what does the child get from the behaviour, or more simply, how does the behaviour help? How does it help them? And then think about providing for that need in more positive, kind of pro-social ways that are not kind of odd or going to drive a wedge between children and their peers or whatever it might be. So I think around the food hoarding thing, we can do things like giving permission to take food. Listen, you don't need to hide food. It's there. Just help yourself. Now, you may need then to deal with an over-taking of food, but then you can respond to that and you can say, well, yeah, okay, just take this and eat that. And if you need more later, come back and get some more rather than grab a whole load at once. This was illustrated beautifully for me. I did some work in an orphanage in Romania many years ago, not long after the revolution. And we took a load of toys into this particular orphanage, and there was, I don't know, 40, 50 kids there. 3 members of staff looking after all these kids. Most of them were in the cots most of the time. So we had to teach these kids to play. So there was a neglect around things like personal attention, stimulation, and play, you know. So when we took them out and took them outside the beautiful garden, we took them out and running on the grass, kicking footballs around, they were really kind of quite shell-shocked. And then we unloaded a whole load of toys, probably prematurely as it happened. And I remember this one little boy who I'd be about 5, something like that. So kids who 5 will play, won't they? And they've played a lot. This little lad was about 5, and I remember he gathered as many of these toys as he could find, and he was literally holding them with his arms and his legs completely kind of wrapped around these toys, just holding them, and he just sat with a big pile of toys looking around. And there's a sort of similar thing with that. I haven't had this, or this in some way has been an issue for me. Now I've got tons of it, so I feel I need to kind of have it all at once, and that can be a developmental kind of social learning, etiquette around food thing, but it can also be a very urge-driven thing because they've been hungry and food has been inconsistent. So I just kind of share that by way of an idea about thinking about giving permission. It's okay. The food's not going away. If you need food, all you need to do is help yourself from this cupboard. And maybe giving kids their own cupboard. One of the responses in the group was saying they'd worked with a young person with this problem, and they gave them their own drawer in the fridge and said, this stuff is yours. If you need to eat this, you can have, this is your stuff. And help kids to buy stuff to stock that, and try and make it a mix of healthy and other stuff. But that in itself, again, gives agency. It gives choice, predictability, that can really help kids to overcome the food thing that they may have. Have a snack box that they can help themselves to. I think another thing is that offering food more regularly, maybe than we normally would. Particularly, I'm thinking particularly here of foster carers, kinship carers who are dealing with kids with these sorts of difficulties, but also maybe residential workers will come across this as well. So offer food more regularly than you normally would, and it gives this kind of message: there's always food there. Food is not scarce here. Food is not an issue that you need to worry about here. And eventually, as food remains available and accessible, anxiety should dial down over time. I think if you are leaving the house to go for a walk or a drive or whatever it is, make sure the child knows that you're taking food with you. There is food here. I've got some snacks for us while we're out. So anxiety about accessing food when they're out, which can also lead to the need to hoard it when they're in, so that when they come back from being out, they can go straight and eat. If we have a place where they can help themselves to food, and we deliberately and visibly, very visibly take food with us when we go out, then obviously that helps kids as well. Things like having a really clear and predictable food routine, meal times, is important for all the obvious reasons. But the other reason is that it teaches food regulation. That if we have regular routines, children's internal physical processes and their ability to understand those processes, it's a thing called interoception. It's your ability to understand and know what the different feelings and sensations are in your body and what they mean. Well, if kids can't separate hunger from other things that they feel, one of the ways to help them with that is a regular food routine, because what they'll find is their body and its need for food falls in with that routine, and then over time they can separate the food bit and the I'm going to have a meal in a few minutes bit from other kinds of feelings. And again, it helps to dial it down, helps to sort of slow the chaos and help with regulation. And I think, as with all of these things, maybe just talking gently and sensitively but openly about it as an issue. I've noticed you've been taking food and hide it in your bedroom. I understand maybe you're a bit worried about food, so how can we help you? Maybe if we put a little box in your bedroom, would that help you, so that you've got somewhere safe to store it? You don't need to hide it. Or tell you what we could do is get that box and keep it in here. That's your box. If you're taking food from that box, nobody's going to tell you off for it. It's accessible for you, and so on. Being open and just put the spotlight on it in a way that's loving, sensitive. I think the other thing to bear in mind in general, just comes to mind really, is that kids, particularly in foster care where neglect has been the issue, or in kinship care of course, is that they may well not associate food with being nurtured and loved, and the provision of food as being part of the adult-child nurturing relationship. We feel nurtured when somebody gives us food and we share food. There's a relational cohesion that comes in that. Well, these kids have not felt that. Food is utilitarian. I eat it because I need it, but that's it. It doesn't have that relational quality, and therefore it doesn't relate necessarily to being loved and being cared for and stuff like that. So again, I think regularity can really help with that, and maybe giving small gifts of food that specifically link food with being loved and being cared for, and that kind of thing can be great. Sharing food together as a relational thing, obviously, is part of that. So there's a couple of really good links in the group if you want to check out the chat on that. There were links to the Institute for Attachment that was relating to kids with reactive attachment disorder, who can use food in very different ways from the ones I've described. That doesn't apply generally to kids. Not many kids end up with a diagnosis for that, but I'll put the link in the description. But there are also links for the National Fostering Group, NFA, I think it is, but National Fostering Group, and also to Food in Care, which was new to me, and Martin Hatton, who's a regular poster on here, hi Mark, posted that, and it's really good. In fact, I'm going to share my screen with you and just take you to that website because it's really good, and I want you to be able to see that. Here we go. So this is Food in Care, and there's a lovely article here on hoarding food. There are also links to food aversions, fussy eating, eating disorders, children with difficulty eating, food as a symbol. There's a couple of videos of carers of children, things you can do, some of which I've nicked and just mentioned to you now. It's another carer talking about that. And then right at the bottom is this link here, which is a download link to a booklet, which if you click brings you here. Now this is 100 pages long, and it's a free download, and it covers all the things we just talked about: eating well, special diet, food behavior, the emotional significance of food, all the things we've just mentioned, and then about being active sources of healthy advice. There's some good links, and it's great. So again, I will put a link in the description to that, because it's fab. So that is foodincare.org.uk, and then if you just search for hoarding food. It's really good. Talk about specialist niche website, but there's some cracking good advice on there, and that resource particularly is a good reference source. Right, I'm going to put my specs on and just have a look in the comments, see if you've got any guys, you've got anything you want to talk about. If you haven't, then fair enough. Who's on? Amanda, hi. Sabrina, hello. Molly, Pamela, Zoe, great to see you guys. Thanks for being on. There's others on who are choosing to stay incognito. Come out into the open. It's safe here. Right, let's have a look what we got. Zoe, what's your view of young people wishing to remain in residential care as they feel they don't need a family placement? Yeah, wow, yeah. Really good question, Zoe. And it happens a lot, actually. I guess we've all come across this at different times. I do think that when kids have been often through family breakdown, often a series of foster placements, then into residential care, and maybe they go straight into residential care. But in either scenario, I just think it's dead scary, really, to go from a larger corporate, I don't mean corporate in a business sense, I mean group environment, group living environment, even if there's only a couple of kids in the placement, to go from that to a home that they don't know, that they're not familiar with, that is brand new, is so incredibly scary. I think for some kids it's that big nuclear red button that they just hit and say, nah, not doing it. Don't want it. Love it here. And I think, like anything else, we have to try and drill down below that and get a sense of why it is that might be there. And I think some kids, it's just plain terrifying. Also, they don't have any choice in that. It's very disempowering. Also, professionals are making decisions about the placement that we all know, despite the best efforts at matching kids, ultimately raw pragmatism happens. I've lost count the number of times this has happened, where you're looking for a placement and we have this thing called matching, which where we're supposed to match placements with children, but we all know we just don't have enough of a breadth of placements to be able to match. We don't match. The matching is, have we got a bed? Is there somebody registered to take a teenager or a little one, or who's free and could have them now? And usually it's a yes or no to whether we've got a bed or not. Not really a yes or no to have we got a carefully matched placement that particularly suits the specific needs of this child and therefore can really help them and they can dovetail in there. I think the other problem that we do is their kids are used to moves being quick and unplanned sometimes. That's really problematic, because not only is foster care scary, quick and unplanned into foster care is terrifying, because it's not just what I'm going to, it's the loss of what I'm currently in. And I think we miss those two things sometimes, that kids really suffer loss of where they are, not just anticipation and trepidation about where they're going. So I think the only way around that, I think, really is very carefully, to take a long time over it, and to smooth kids into new placements at a pace that suits them. We do this better in adoption. We do it better with placing children with a view to adoption, but also in placing children with a view to long-term foster care, so they tend to be little. We're better at doing introductions over a period of time, visits out with the new carers, couple of overnights, and then they're in, and it's more graduated. Some residential places are very good at this. If they're taking kids from custody or from another placement, there'll be a long introduction to that. Lots of text chat back and forth, lots of sharing images of the new placement, lots of orientation, helping kids decorate their room, choose the furniture, that kind of stuff. But that's scary and new as well, Is this really my furniture? Am I spending your money? Do you agree with what I like? Are the other kids in placement going to have the same stuff as me? What if I look infantile or trying to be too clever? Or lots of unknowns and uncertainties around that for kids. So we do it better in those scenarios, but it's still very difficult. And I think the overall lesson is take your time, do it very carefully. But personally, and not everybody would agree with this, depends on the child. Personally, my sense is if they don't want it and they're adamant, then we need to respect those views. But and we need to commit to long-term residential care. And we may not see that as ideal, but actually for children, particularly, it tends to be teenagers who exhibit that kind of preference. Then we need to recognise that actually they're on a transition into independence eventually, and they're probably further along in that transition, albeit not a healthy one, than most kids their age. And most kids of 13, 14, 15, 16 are not transitioning to independence. They're in their families being teenagers, and they can do it within the safe bounds of a family. But if you're that age and you're in care, you've already lost your family. There's already been serious breakdown, maybe even bereavement, certainly separation. So to then enforce another move which is not helpful, I think we need to not do it for some kids, and also recognise that kids in this situation are often, because they're further along that road towards independence and whatever that will be, that actually getting with that programme and helping them to do that well is probably more of a positive focus rather than dealing with this negative sense of not wanting to be in a new placement. My feeling is that even though we all accept that resi care can be really difficult, actually it can be amazing. And for some kids, a lot of kids, it can be their home, it can become their family. And places that do it well, you see that. You see kids content at home in that group living environment, and it's not negative at all. So I think resi care's got a bad rep around that, and sometimes we need to back off from our obsession to get kids into fostering. Sorry, that was I didn't intend going on so long. I hope that's useful. Pam, afternoon, Pam. Hi, Molly. Hi, Sabrina. Could you talk about endings with kids and how to finish them on a good note? Yes, absolutely. Well, I mean, it relates to this, doesn't it? So before we get into endings, let me just remind you, we are live in the Troubled Kids group. If you're watching this on YouTube, get yourself subscribed so that we can get this through to you, and you can join the club. It's a big club. There's more than 1,200 of us in here now. We've more than doubled in the last few weeks, so it'd be good to see you. So endings, yeah. Well, it relates to this, just as we've said about helping kids into placement slowly and doing that introduction and stuff. I really, really passionately believe that we need to do the same for endings. So I don't know what kind of age kids you had in mind, Sabrina, but I think if it's endings for interventions, if it's endings for placements, if it's endings for a change of worker, if it's endings for transition between schools, endings of any kind really, but particularly these big kind of milestone endings almost. I think thinking ahead is really key, and planning ahead is really key. I've got a really good friend who is a very senior teacher, and she has this phrase that she uses saying, what I try to do is look down the line and see where the ball's going to bounce and then plan for that now. And I thought, it really helped me to understand this general idea of if we try and anticipate based on what we know is currently happening, try and anticipate what's going to happen down there and mitigate that now, mediate the likely impact of that now. So I think endings and new beginnings are usually better if they're well planned, if they are take a while, and by a while I mean however long the child needs it to take, and also if there is transitional people and or objects that make that easier. So I think, just to unpick that a bit, I don't think you can do good transitions quickly. I think it takes a while. forget the doing it quick bit. It has to be done over time. So if it's been done over time and you are intervening with somebody and that's going to end, I think having the end in sight, almost at the beginning, is useful, unless it's going to undermine the engagement and the establishment of a good sort of therapeutic relationship, a meaningful relationship. Then you don't want to do it then. But I think as soon as the kind of ending comes on anybody's agenda, even if it's just we're thinking about, we're getting on well with this work, maybe we can start to dial it down with a view to finishing, then that's when we need to start to raise it, bring it into the consciousness of the child, but give it a sense of it's going to be a while, because it takes kids a while, so it's never quick. Plan it well ahead, and ask children specifically what to do during that transition phase. I think it's really important, or through the build up to the transition rather. And then think about transitional people and objects are really important. One of the things we've learned in the youth justice work, where we've been dealing with these very complex, high-end, risky children who reoffend a lot and quite often pose a risk to themselves and other people, is trying to help colleagues, particularly in youth offending teams, but in other agencies as well, to see endings as not relating to how long the court order is, or how long the cognitive behaviour programme is, or the work pack, the knife crime pack, or whatever it is that they're working through. Not to see it as a feature of we've got all these cases waiting, so we need to end this one. That's just bad decision making. And to help them to see that actually, if you plan your end in advance, take a while doing it, and then have transitional people and objects, I'll talk about that in a minute, it actually speeds up the whole process. It smooths it over better, and I think it also reduces the likelihood that there's going to be further breakdown once the transition takes place. So I think that's useful to know. So in terms of transitional people and objects, I think things like, one of the things I used to do if I was doing work with a child, which obviously I was always doing work with a child, but if we were producing things, you know, maybe we'd done something in a sand tray or on a play mat, and I used to have a Polaroid camera sometimes to take photos, so the kid could take it back and show their foster carer, or they could stick it in a book, or we'd make a scrapbook of stuff we'd done, or bits of work we'd done on paper, flip chart paper, paintings, whatever it might be, to gather that together and begin to celebrate that in advance of the end. And go through it, because it's not just a reminder of the good stuff that's happened and the great work you've done together. It's also a kind of rehearsal of what they can do when they've left, to help them deal with the new place and remember the old place and the old people and the old bit of work, or whatever it might be. So I think that's helpful, transitional. And objects. I'm a complete believer in giving kids something to remember you by. Nothing unprofessional. I wouldn't give them a photo of me or anything like that. It's more likely to traumatise them anyway. But I mean, something, so I might, if I've got a pen and I'm using a pen, I might give them a pen. Or I would certainly write a card, always. Yeah, write a card saying, listen, it's been great working with you. We've done some really good stuff. Thank you for trusting me with your information and with this experience. I've learned from it, from you, and I really wish you well in the future. That kind of transitional object can be really good. So objects are really important. Also, I think transitional people can be important for some kids as well. So one of the things, again, we've done with the youth justice guys is to say, you may have finished your formal involvement. You may have finished the court order work that you've done. You may have been and seen the child, introduced them into their next professional relationship with whoever is working with them now or not, back to home, back to foster care, whatever it might be. But I'm going to pop in a couple of weeks. I'm going to just put my head around the door and check how you are, and do that. Put a note in your diary so that on their first birthday, after you've finished working with them, you just ping them a text, or you might want to inquire with other professionals first to see where they're at, whether that's going to destabilise things. But you remain in touch a bit. And I think the other thing is that we give kids a route back to us that they can then take on board, so that if we can say, listen, we're always here, I work here, so if you ever need to come back, even if I'm not here, there'll be other people here who you can always ring up. If you've got good news, share it with us, or whatever. So I think transitional people can be done like that. It's long tail ending. Not that you continue to make contact and continue to keep the thing alive after its time, but there is a route back for the child, and you demonstrate that in the early days after the end of the work by making contact to say, bear in mind there's a route back here. And we've had a couple of lovely examples of that, where kids have come back months, over a year later, sometimes years later, maybe to show you their baby, for example. We've had a baby. You get a knock on the office door, and there's a child there with a baby showing you their baby. I had that in a shopping centre not that very long ago, or they ring in just to say they're getting married, or could they just talk to you? Or we had one girl ring in to say, listen, her auntie who she lived with was away, so she rang in to say, I've made a careers appointment because I've finished at college and I don't know what to do next. Would you mind just coming with me? And it was a route back that she used totally appropriately, which helped her to stay grounded, stay stable where she is, and crack on. Fantastic stuff. So they're not quick. Spend time doing it. Plan it well ahead. Spend time doing it. And transitional people and objects are really helpful. So that's useful, Sabrina. I'm sure that was a whistle-stop tour. So we're here. We're in the Trouble Kids group. Subscribe if you want to be a part of this. And watch it live. Otherwise, you can catch us on YouTube. Who we got? Mary. Hi, Mary. Mary O'Shaughnessy. Great to have you on, Mary. Hope you're okay. Fiona, afternoon. Hi. I'm glad that was useful. So bless you. Right, Amanda. There was some self-harm training on your page some weeks ago. I can't find it. Do you have a link? Please. Right. Now then. Would that be training, Amanda, or I haven't taken it down, so let me just share my screen with you. I'm just going on the website here because it might be maybe it's in the blog. If you search, there's this search button on the top right. If it's on the website, if you go on here, can't spell now. Never could. No, not self-care, self-harm, self-charm even. It's a blog post waiting to happen, isn't it? Search that up, self-harm. There's a number of things here on self-harm, but I don't know about training per se. So it will either be on the Johnny Matthew Com Facebook page. It may well be on there. So this Trouble Kids group is a group of my work Facebook page, Johnny Matthew Com. So you could possibly find it there, Amanda. I'm sorry, I don't know off the top of my head what that was, but I'm sure there'll be stuff up there. You can get some good stuff on that from people like Young Minds and others. Sometimes have good training around that. So unless you guys have got any other questions, I think that pretty well sees us through. Just to say that if any of you missed the run through on sorry, I'm just navigating back to this page, we're launching this self-harm course, as you know, a self-care course, self-care course last week and this week. That runs out on Monday. So if you guys are interested on it, now it'll still be there, but you'll notice down here that the price is currently 29 quid in total. It'll go up to 49 quid plus VAT, which is something like 58.80 and nearly 60 quid, because that's the price point we think is right for it. But obviously we wanted to launch it to give it a push and to give you guys a chance to get it cheaper. We've sold loads of these, so if you've got an agency who is interested, we've had somebody buy 50, somebody else buy 30, and they get another discount again if they buy more than one. So have a word with your agencies. You can find out where that is. I'll give you the link in a moment for that. But there's 12 videos, average length about 15 minutes. There's a 30-odd page workbook you can download the transcripts for that, or have subtitles running. You get a certificate with 8 hours CPD credit for that as well, so you can evidence your learning and so on. So that's that. If you're interested in that, you can find that here, and that'll take you to that page I've just shown you, which is a kind of info page. So if you go to this link, you're not committed to buying anything. It just takes you through. And that's all based on my little book, this little book behind me here. But there's quite a lot of additional material in there that is not in the book. So if you've got the book, you might also, and that was useful to you, you might also find this course useful. So let's have a look. Stacey, she was going to answer a question. Hi, Stacey. She was going to answer a question about ending work with young people after being their key person potentially for a number of years, and concerns about how they'll leave that relationship. So that leave that relationship behind. So that info on traditions and endings was great. Yeah, absolutely. Transitions. Well, absolutely. Both, actually. Because I think one of the things that you miss with a quick transition is you skirt over traditions. And actually, and it's not traditions in the classic sense, is it? But it's things like little habits that kids have that carers or people who've worked with kids for a while really know that the next person won't know about. Little preferences, things they like to eat, how their routine works, places they like to go, how they deal with certain things, emotional responses and people, things that they shared with previous carers or key workers. And I think we miss those at our peril. Those are the little detailed things that we have with all our with our own kids and in our own families. It's like it's Friday night, we will be drinking wine tonight. Me and Karen will be drinking wine tonight. There's no doubt. In fact, we won't even have to ask. We'll just one of us will just crack a bottle of wine and that'll be it, because it's Friday and that's what we do on a Friday night. We tend to take it really steady in the week, but Friday's bottle of wine, no doubt about it. It's a little thing, but you know what? If we don't these days because there's a ridiculous amount of wine in the house. But if we ever get to the point where there's no wine, we'll be like, oh, flipping heck, right? We need to get wine because it just doesn't feel right. And I think with kids in transition, feeling right can be really helped by drilling down into these little detailed things. New carers need to know what the kid's favourite top is, what they like to do on a Friday, Saturday, how they respond, what's their to different situations and people, what's their favourite TV programme, what kind of music do they like, there's a football team they support. Little things are big things in terms of feeling nurtured, held, safe and known. And I think for kids who we intervene with, and particularly kids in the care system, the lack of feeling known has quite an impact on identity and feeling okay. So thank you, Stace. Absolutely bang on the money. Brill. Well, I think we're nearly done, guys. So just to say, in terms of next week, few things. Monday is the last day to get the self-care course for 29 quid. That runs out midnight on Monday. I will email people to remind you. That'll be done then. The week after next is Youth Work Week. So not next Wednesday, but the one after, the 24th, I believe, we will be focusing on youth work. So any questions about that, if you know people in youth work, please refer them to the page. Please put the word out, guys, for the YouTube channel, because I want to grow things on there, because YouTube is ubiquitous and I really want to get this what hopefully is useful information from all of us out there to as many people as possible. So please share that. So Youth Work Week after next. Let me have questions in comments about that, or you can email me here, or DM me on Twitter or whatever works for you. So there we go. That's our first Ask Me Anything. I quite enjoyed that. It was kind of unscripted and enjoyed it. So maybe do that again. Johnny gives away books at random. Yeah, except I've run out of books. And I've got 3 waiting to be posted and I've got no stamps for them. But I do give books away. I love books. So I'm really looking forward to that. So Fiona, excited about Youth Work Week? Absolutely, am me. So that'd be great. I came out of Youth Work. I'll be interviewing Dusty Kennedy from the Wales Interim Youth Work Board, who's a former youth worker himself. He's a colleague of mine, TRM Academy. He and I put that self-care course together. He's an all-round good egg who totally knows his stuff on this, and is in fact, I will get you a link next week. He's going to be streaming in Twitch. And he's going to be interviewing Keith Taller, who's the chair of the Wales Interim Youth Work Board as well. And Keith is a long-term worker with troubled kids. He's now independent children's rights advocate and stuff. So that's great. Anyway, bless you guys. So Martin's saying you now have 3 of these running. Probably. Yeah, it's because I tried twice and I couldn't get in. I don't know what happened there. Anyway, bless you guys. Thank you for being on. It's a delight, as always, to be here. It feels like a kind of catching up with friends. I have got links to that book, the websites, and so on that I will put with the video on YouTube. If you guys are in the group, which you are, then you've already had that. And you can get the links there. So bless you. Look after yourself, guys. Thanks for being on, everybody. I really appreciate you being here. And I'll catch you again at some point soon. Take care and have a fantastic weekend. There needs to be wine. Cheers.